continue with the End Zone, presented by TiVo, alongside Ian Eagle. Jason Horowitz, glad to be with you from New York on CBSSports.com and on your TiVo DVR via TiVo Cast. Randy Cross also with us in Atlanta. This segment's about quarterbacks being benched after taking their teams to the Super Bowl, and obviously we're talking about Rex Grossman and what he did with the Bears. But there are plenty of other guys that this has happened to in the last 25 years. We'll get to those in a sec, but let's just start with the situation for Rex Grossman. And it's something that's been a long time coming.
It has. I can't say that anybody's surprised, other than Rex, apparently. The quotes after the benching, I'm a bit shocked and I'm frustrated. Everybody else kind of knew it was coming, Rex, and in fact, many thought it would happen last year. Brian Griese gets his opportunity now with a Bears team that has some deeper issues, not only offensively, but on the other side of the ball. For Grossman, yeah, the numbers this year have been abysmal. 1 touchdown, 6 interceptions, and Randy, I got to believe inside that locker room, it's gotten to the point where guys on that team had to question what the coach was doing and whether or not this move should have been made sooner than this.
Well, and the reason it wasn't, Ian, is because from an organizational standpoint, you spend the money on a young quarterback, you spend the draft pick like they did on a young quarterback, you just can't pull the trigger on this and basically shove everything in a little ball and throw it away like this. Confidence-wise, he's going to take a big hit. But I will have a little word of advice for Rex. I know you were surprised. I know you were shocked. I'd suggest, A, you look at game tape, and B, I suggest you stay warm because Brian Griese has proven 2 things in this league. One, he is an adequate football player and an adequate quarterback that, when surrounded by the right people, can do very well. Secondly is, while he's doing that, he's going to get hurt. So Grossman will be back in a game in fairly short order.
Well, I like what Brian Griese had to say about the fact that, when someone asked that he hasn't started in a couple of years, that he said, well, my body feels good. That is a good
It's a positive spin.
But Randy, I want to ask you, because of the 3 of us, clearly, you're the only one that's actually been in a locker room and has been part of a team in this situation, if we don't count middle school football. So is it a situation where you think that if this went on any longer, it would have been a divided locker room?
Well, it tends to get that way anyway on a team that's kind of out of whack like Chicago. The defense is that much better than the offense. It's much like the Baltimore Ravens were for a long period of time. Remember when they were going through that stretch where, 8 games or whatever it was without a touchdown? That can be really a dynamic where the locker room starts pulling against each other. And I think it was a smart move by Lovey because, whether it's been take a quarterback situation, doesn't matter which one you can bring into. Guys take sides, and I'm sure in this case, guys were taking sides.
The reality, though, is that when you bring a team to a Super Bowl, normally that would mean that you get an extended honeymoon after the fact. There is precedent around the NFL through the years of players that have either led a team to a Super Bowl or even won a Super Bowl, and the next year they find themselves either on the bench or on a different team.
It certainly has, and it's no different the last few years. Trent Dilfer, it was on that Ravens team that Randy was talking about, won the Super Bowl. They didn't want him back, so they go with Elvis Gerbach the next season, and Trent Dilfer finds his way in Seattle. Neil O'Donnell took Pittsburgh to the Super Bowl, and all of a sudden he made Larry Brown the MVP for the Dallas Cowboys. And
made him a whole lot of money,
a whole lot of money, too, when he went to Oakland. So Neil O'Donnell wasn't wanted back. They went with Mike Tomczak for the entire season. And, you go back to the 80s and with what the Raiders did, and Jim Plunkett to Mark Wilson, and obviously, Dan Marino took over as well. But it's a situation that it's happened before.
It's happened before, and Randy, it doesn't guarantee you that spot the next year. I think the one thing we've learned about professional football, certainly in this day and age, it's about production. Yeah. It's about results. And the Chicago Bears, in my mind, had no other choice. Brian Griese can manage this offense. Brian Griese is not going to fall on his face. I agree with you. There's a tremendous chance that Brian Griese might find himself back on the bench because of injury. But as far as being productive, I think Griese can do the job here. I'm not saying they're going back to the Super Bowl, but he can help right the ship offensively.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Brian Griese took over for John Elway when he retired, so he's been in this situation
Bubby
before.
Brister was given the job initially. Griese was just a young guy, and then Griese eventually got the job. Yeah.
But remember 2 things, guys. A, Rex was their player. He was going to be their next great guy, and they sat around 2 years waiting as he recovered from injuries to really pay off this draft pick. Most of the other guys you're talking about, they weren't the marquee player. They weren't a top first-round pick. Plunkett had been reclaimed from the Niners. You go down that Trent Dilfer he started with Tampa Bay. It's a tougher thing when you're talking about somebody you've hitched your franchise to making this change.
In 3 weeks from now, we might be doing the Kyle Orton segment. So all of this might mean very little, depending upon how the Bears handle this
scary
move.
thought.
Exactly.
Well, he did lead them to the playoffs a couple of years ago without scoring points either, so it's something that Chicago is used to. One thing to keep in mind here, of those guys that were replaced, none of them went on to be successful again after they were replaced, including Dilfer and maybe Grossman now here as well. All right, folks, that's it for this segment of the End Zone. Stick around, plenty more to come. We're going to talk about a quarterback who is irreplaceable, that being Brett Favre. You can always rewatch us on demand on CBSSports.com and on your TiVo DVR via TiVo Cast. We'll see you soon.